Like, how in the world did this ever happen to me? Why aren't doctors recognizing this? Why aren't we being listened to? We've had people going through cancer in TSW, and they said going through cancer was actually easier because you've got this care support team. But when you're dealing with this, it's like you don't know how long it's going to last.
Welcome to That's Derm Good. I'm Janelle Ball, and I'm excited to bring you thought-provoking conversations about biologics, specialty medications, treatments, and so much more. I'll be chatting with some amazing guests about access, affordability, and advocacy. You're really going to enjoy this show. Welcome to That's Derm Good. Today, my guest is Kelly Barta. Kelly is the president of ITSAN and executive director for the Coalition of Skin Diseases. Welcome, Kelly. Thank you for joining me.
Great to be here, Janelle.
Yes. I am so excited. We met a couple weeks ago in DC at SDPA, and I was so excited to talk to you. As soon as I walked by your booth, I was like, yeah, we need to have a conversation. First of all, your booth with the Coalition of Skin Diseases, and you had all these different pamphlets, and my passion is really trying to figure out what is the best way to get access for patients and education and support. And you had all of that right there at the table. So I was so excited to meet you. And okay, for those listeners that don't know, what is ITSAN and what does that stand for?
Okay, so ITSAN is the International Topical Steroid Awareness Network. And I have been working with that organization since 2017 because I was a person going through topical steroid withdrawal myself, and I wanted to get involved and help somehow. So it's been incorporated since 2012. That's actually when I started TSW. It had just come online 3 months before. So I'm super grateful for that. And we work supporting patients who are going through this condition and raising awareness to TSW in general.
Okay. So what kind of things, as far as awareness goes, how do you reach people that are dealing with TSW?
Well, a lot of it is just online searches, right? Because patients are having trouble. They're not getting answers. They don't know what to do or where to go. And then they'll just Google. A lot of people are Googling, myself included, back in 2012, because when I stopped using steroids, all of these symptoms started up that were not my baseline eczema anymore. They were a lot different. Burning skin, this bone deep itching, swelling, edema, all of this. Just a couple days after I had stopped using topical steroids, and I was using them very judiciously, but I was using them at different parts of my body. So I didn't realize how that was a continuous use for a long time, but I was in so much pain. I was actually breathing like I was in childbirth. Like that's how much the burning and the itching was going on in the night. So I was searching around on the internet looking for topical steroid rebound because I knew oral steroids had a rebound flare, but I'd never heard about that with topicals. So when I put that in, or withdrawal, I may have even used that word, then ITSAN popped up and I found that community. I read the different symptoms of what does it look like when your skin becomes addicted to these medicines. And I checked all the boxes. And then what does it look like to go through this period of recovery, which was very scary. But at the same time, I felt this immense sense of relief because it was answering all of these mounting questions I've been having over the years of why is my skin getting worse? Why am I developing all of these allergies and food sensitivities and all of that? So most people find us from just searching online, or now there's such a wave in the patient community in a grassroots level. So on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, people are sharing their journeys. And because it's so shocking, and there are so many eczema patients, over 31 million just in the US, hundreds of millions of worldwide, this is spreading like wildfire. And people are really concerned because most of us in the eczema world have used topical steroids at one point or another, right? So there's not a lot of information even on what's going on. And that's really scary when you're the patient. And then when medical providers are saying, well, that's all misinformation. The question is, well, where is the real information in the first place? How can we call it misinformation? We just don't know. So it's a really critical time for us to come together as the specialty, as patients, to try to put our heads together with industry, researchers, and try to figure this out and help the people who are stuck in this situation.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me about your personal journey with this, and when did that switch from just eczema to TSW?
I wish I could tell you when. It's kind of like I've always had that question about alcoholism too, because you hear about it all the time. It's like, when does that happen? How many drinks do you have to have, or how heavily do you need to drink before it happens? What we've seen in the patient community is that everyone has a different threshold which is one of the reasons why we have to figure out what is that and what group of patients is more susceptible to this. So my story was I was diagnosed as a little girl, 4 to 5 years old, with basic, typical eczema behind the knees and the crooks of the arm. I was given, the protocol of use hydrocortisone cream, use good moisturizers. And honestly, at the time, hydrocortisone really didn't work all that well for me. So we just tried to manage with moisturizers. My mom was very holistic, and so she gave me lecithin and cod liver oil and all that kind of stuff. But when I hit preteen, the eczema in the back of my knees and the crooks of my arms spread to my hands and my neck. And that's the place where like everyone sees. And now I'm a preteen kid, and all I care about is fitting in and people liking me. And now I'm, getting called names, and just the bullying that happens around skin disease because it's so visible. That was actually more distressing, I think, than the itchy red skin. So we went back to the doctors, saw a derm, did some allergy testing, and was put on topical steroids. And it was a quick, easy, fast fix, right? Within 2 to 3 days, my skin would look better, feel better, which is like, this is amazing. I can eat whatever I want. I can do whatever I want. As long as I have my trusty little tube of tridesolone with me, I'm good. So I managed my skin like that for 26 years. 10 of those last years, I added Protopic because the capillaries in my face were starting to break, and I was noticing that. And that was right when Protopic came out. And so my dermatologist told me, use that on your face, use steroids on the rest of you. So that was my protocol. And one of the telltale signs of dependence is that you need a higher potency over time to maintain clearance. And that's my story. So I started with a low to mid potency, worked my way up all the way to betamethasone dipropionate. So, I was told, don't use it a lot, be careful where you use it. But the only risk that I had heard was it can thin the skin. And because I was a healthy individual, I exercise, I juice fast, I do all the things. I didn't feel like there was any risk involved in the use. And like I said, I didn't use it like a moisturizer. I would use it for 2 to 3 days till the rash went away. But then the thing was, it would pop up somewhere else. So now I'm not using it on my hand, but now it's on my arm, or now it's behind my neck. So I was using it more than I realized. So over time, I'm developing, like I said, new food sensitivities where I could hardly pick anything off a menu at a restaurant anymore. I'm like, this is kind of crazy. I'd put my hand in my purse and pull it out and I have hives. I'm like, what's happening? Why is my body so reactive? I was thinking, well, it must be because if my long-term use of steroids could possibly have thinned my skin, like they say, maybe stuff's getting into my bloodstream and I'm becoming reactive about that. So that was one thought I had. And I talked to my doctor about it. My GP was treating me at the time. And he said, don't try to figure this out. This is hereditary. You're going to drive yourself crazy. You're going to need steroids the rest of your life. Just kind of accept that fact. So I walked away from that conversation frustrated. I mean, this is 2010, right? 2011, 2012. So it's all we had kind of at the time. So I walked away from that with a lot of questions, wanting to really reclaim my health because I saw it was going down not the kind of road that I wanted to walk. And it was one day I went to pick up my prescription at Costco, and there was a new pharmacy tech on duty, and she flagged my prescription. And she just said, hey, wow, this is a really high potency steroid. You need to be careful where you're using it. Well, yeah, I know. And she's like, well, how long have you been using this? And I had to calculate, but then I was like, oh, well, probably 10 of the last 26 years. And just for a split second, her eyeballs like kind of popped open. And I got this sick feeling in my stomach thinking, what do you know that I don't know? What have I not been told? And so that really, because I felt like I wasn't getting help from the healthcare providers, I went on my own quest and started looking into clinical studies and found one that said, yes, they thin your skin, but they also upregulate IgE. So it's doing something internally, heightening my immune response. So I was like, okay, that's not great. Makes sense though. And then I found another study from Canada talking about using a better barrier cream can lessen your use of topical steroids by 40%. So I thought, well, bingo, that's what I'm going to do. And I actually had this idea like, well, maybe I'm going to start a skincare line. This is my new lot in life. I'll just, start practicing on myself and experimenting on my own skin. So I was getting mango butter, shea butter, coconut oil, jojoba oil, all the things. And I was using that instead of topical steroids, Well, when I'd have reactions, I was thinking in my mind, well, my skin's getting worse. Well, I'm just, allergic to this product, instead of thinking my skin is starting to like not have the steroids and starting to freak out. So when I finally was only using on my hands, that was the last place, because this was, I still to this day, you can see I have Band-Aids on my hands. The skin is very thin. They would crack all the time when I'm cooking or sewing or gardening, just very sensitive hands. I finally stopped using and started using a different product instead. And within 2 days, like I said, I was on my couch all night long, awake, in terrible pain, terrible bone deep itching, like you can't get to it type itch, like all over. It first started in the places I use steroids the most, on my arms. But then in the next couple of weeks, it spread until my entire body was red, burning skin, feeling like someone poured boiling water over me. So I couldn't turn to the side. Like when I was driving, I couldn't even hardly turn to look for traffic. And then my legs started swelling up really badly, along with these crazy itch attacks that happened. I was within a month bedridden, and I was bedridden for 1.5 years. My hair fell out. I developed a cataract. My skin split open to tiny little fissures all over. That was extremely painful. I had to lay just still on my bed, naked on towels, because I was oozing so much. And I'd had to plan my trips to the bathroom, to get something to eat, because it's like you wanted to move as little as possible because of the pain level. And I had to go between my bed and the bathtub every 2 hours just to tolerate what was going on. I did not have relief for years. So it wasn't like a rebound that lasts for a month and then it goes away and you feel better. It was like unrelenting pain. And on top of that, no one knew what was going on. My family said, you got to get into a doctor, because I was losing weight. They were really worried. But at the time, ITSAN's co-founder was a dermatologist out of Beverly Hills, Dr. Marvin Rappaport. And he had shared, the only way to the other side is through it. You have to go through it. Just the cessation of steroids, and you need a good support system to get you through, and get comfort measures if you need sleep medications or nerve medications, because there's a lot of nerve involvement in this too. Felt like stabbing knitting needles into my limbs, or it feels like bugs are crawling on you, or these weird zinger feelings. It's really strange. So anyway, I was thinking I just have to get through this. My family's telling me, well, go get some labs done to make sure you're okay. My labs actually came out pretty normal, which this is kind of found across the board. It's just something happening in the skin. So at the time, because we didn't really have any other options, I have a faith in God. And I thought, okay, if this is where you're leading me and I need to get out to the other side, you're going to help me figure that out. And so I did all the study. I spent that 1.5 years just like scouring everything that we know about eczema and inflammatory skin and steroids. And in the middle of it, I had this idea kind of drop into me, like, you need to write about this, because there's nothing out there. I searched on Amazon. I'm like, I can't be the one. I can't do this. I barely had 10 minutes a day that were just stillness inside myself, because it was so horrible. It was really, really painful. And yeah, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Well, I decided to do it, and I started writing, even if it was just 10 or 15 minutes a day, to log what was going on in my body. And then at about 1.5 years, I lost a dear friend of mine, and my marriage started to, go through rocky places, and I couldn't even journal anymore. It was just really difficult emotionally. And it's interesting because and I see this across the board, once your body starts to recover and you're not in, survival mode anymore physically, that's when the emotional wave of this hits. Like, how in the world did this ever happen to me? Why aren't doctors recognizing this? Why aren't we being listened to? Why don't we know what to do? There's no real path, no real timeline. At least when you have a condition, even cancer, we've had people going through cancer in TSW, and they said going through cancer was actually easier because you've got this care support team. You usually have something that you can expect ahead. But when you're dealing with this, it's like, you don't know how long it's going to last, if it's going to get worse, or, you're hoping it gets eventually better. But most times, because it's so long, it's like watching grass grow. You feel like, what if I'm the anomaly? What if everybody else is getting better, but I'm never going to get better? And then when, marriages fall apart, family members fall away, that's when people really lose hope. And we've had suicidal ideation is very high in this group, 47%. We did an international survey. So it's heavy. what we're experiencing is heavy. So because patients aren't, they're not finding support from their practitioner, they're going online to get support. And that's creating its own ball of wax, right? Because then medical practitioners see that as, well, this crazy group of people are medically advising each other. Honestly, I try to tell doctors, it's not that they're even challenging your authority or trying to like publicly shame the medical establishment. They need help and they don't know where to go. And they're trying to find it with each other and they're just trying to get someone to listen to them. But that's kind of where we're at. There's a lot of challenges and we've been working on it. It's slow going though, like as far as working with the FDA and the NIH and others. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you were journaling, this turned into a book that you wrote.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about your book?
Sure. So like I said, I stopped writing because it just got so dark. I would journal once a month just to capture my symptoms and things that I was going through. And then I started getting involved in this work with ITSAN. Then I worked for National Eczema Association a little while and then Allergy and Asthma Network. They were working on a steroid stewardship campaign around oral steroids. And I thought, wow, this is aligned with the topical piece. And then because of the work with the Coalition of Skin Diseases, where now I am the executive director here, I saw, gosh, we have so much in common as skin patient groups. We're dealing with a lot of the same challenges and we can do so much more together than we can do just, our own communities. So that's when I got involved with the coalition and it literally has just been nonstop. I mean, my body was recovering. I started getting involved in the work and it just sucked me in. So it was in 2021, ITSAN at the time, I was still on the board of directors. They had reached out for a blog post and I had forgotten about it until like the day before it was due. And I thought, oh no, what can I provide for them? And I thought, oh, I should just go back into my manuscript because I had written about 150 pages by then and just grab something like my formulation that I had created, like of my own product that I would use on my skin that worked. I went back in there and I started reading it and I thought, oh my gosh, this is really good. And I need to do this. Like now's the time. And I was reading a book given to me by my sister called You're a Badass at Making Money. I think that's the name of it. But it was so empowering where she's talking about there is only one of you in the world. You have something unique to give and you need to put it out there, even if you have to take a risk, even if it's going to be a big investment, which it was for me. Because at the time I was out of my marriage. I was on my own. I had to think about a whole new way of life. But then also she talked about you need to get mentors and people who can help you do that because none of us are like truly, truly, truly experts, right? We need each other. So I called a friend of mine who is an editor and had her work with me. And I'm so glad I did because she helped me look at it in a broader view instead of just writing to the patient or the caregiver, which that's my natural, right, inclination. This is for people going through this to understand who my other audiences were. And that was so critical because I realize that's so important to solve the problem is like, we need the practitioners, we need industry, we need research, we need regulators, policymakers, everybody. So then it became my memoir, a guide for patients and caregivers, especially like I was thinking about the parents. And it's really cool because my editor was a parent of 2 girls with eczema. So she brought that perspective of, I don't even know what my girls need, because it's hard for kids to verbalize certain things. Right. So I wrote a whole guide for parents in there, what I wish my parents knew when I was a little girl, or what I would say now to parents. Like, how can you help your kids? Really everything that I've learned along the way in the last 10 years on eczema, looking at it holistically. What are all your options? Because so many people, you go to the doctor, you have 8 minutes, right? And really your doctor is going to tell you, okay, I think this is probably your best path. But everybody has those questions. What about what I'm eating? What laundry detergent I'm using? What medications are my options? What is the best path for me? So I really wanted to say, okay, here's everything we know. Here are all your options. You make the choice with your practitioner. And then I did the same thing for TSW. Here's the story. It was grueling. I often felt like I was trudging through quicksand, because I had to go back into all those memories and even the pictures, and just watching all of that play out was really, really hard. But in its own way, it was also healing because I was able to look at it now from being on the other side instead of being in the middle of it and not knowing what was going to happen. It was very redemptive. And so as I was writing this, the whole TSW story, the whole mental health aspect of it, because that is one of the heaviest pieces, even worse than the physical piece. And then a call to action for everyone who has a piece of the puzzle in their hand and then can help fix it. So at the end of this, and even just saying, like, looking at it from the other side, I was trying to figure out a title and really, really struggled for a long time with that. It was actually my sister who, she was doing some mock-ups for me because she's an artist on my cover. And she just wrote on there, it was just kind of like out of the blue, she just wrote it, "To eczema with love." And I thought, it makes me almost emotional thinking about it, because like, that's so perfect, because I want to look at it that way, like, yeah, this was a really bad thing that happened to me. This was a real struggle, and a struggle that a lot of us are dealing with it. But I want to look at it from being an overcomer and someone who can live on in spite of some of these challenges, but really look at it too in a way, how do we solve this together? So
that's amazing. I love that. I love the title as well. What point did you start feeling better? Like, what happened and what did you do? Did you use topical creams that were not steroids? Like, did it just, your skin just clear up? I mean, what happened?
Yeah, my skin changed. And this is what we find in a lot of people. What will work for a couple months then won't work, because so much is happening. I feel like the skin is recovering in its own way, and the immune system too. In fact, it took me 9 years to start sweating again, if you can believe that. When I was using steroids, I did not sweat at all. Yeah. And so now I sweat like a normal person, and it's awesome. I actually love it, because I know this is so healthy. This is a good response to my skin. So that being said, I developed my own formula, like I mentioned, and it was a combination of things, because the skin needs some sort of like emollient on it, because it just feels like it's going to, literally, I would do this with my fists, close my fists, and all of the skin would just crack. It was like there was no depth to it. It was so painful. Like, just imagine that, like your skin just like ripping open just from movements. So that needed a thick emollient. And I used what I had for a while. I used Vaseline for a while. As my skin recovered, I would use, is it fine to mention real products on here?
Yeah, absolutely.
I used different things, whatever my skin just felt good with, like how much moisturizer it needed. Now I use Bioderma. That's my go-to. I love that moisturizer. La Roche-Posay also makes the Adoderm cream that works really well on some parts of my body, but it's a little too thick for others. So it really just depends on the area and what my skin wants is what I do with it. I can only use Clinique makeup because a lot of the other stuff still bothers my skin that's sensitive. But as far as, the other piece, not just what I'm putting on my skin, but I would take baths with Dead Sea salts every 2 hours when I was in the worst of it. Because somehow the Dead Sea salts soften the water so it didn't sting my skin. A lot of people, even water hurts, air hurts, if you can believe that. I couldn't go outside. Any movement on my skin just was like, it just made you want to like claw your skin off. So as I got better, it's funny, sometimes really tight, like compression type sleeves would help with that bone deep itch. Other times it's like you didn't want anything on your skin. So it just changed over time. And it was slowly just healing. Believe it or not, a year and a half bedridden, about 3 years housebound. Like, I didn't want to go out in public. I was that uncomfortable. And I would just have these itch attacks all the time. You don't want to be in public with that. 3 years housebound. And then I started to get more functional, but I was exhausted a lot still. It was 5 years until my skin stopped burning, and I did not need a bath every morning first thing when I got up just to make it. It's like you don't want to move. It's like almost like it's hard to describe. It's like you're in this skin suit in every single tiny movement. Like I would wince when I'd put my clothes on. So 5 years until my skin stopped burning. And then it was slowly just healing up where I used steroids the most, on my neck and on my arms and my hands. And I used Chinese medicine. I ran into someone at the National Eczema Expo. She was a practitioner out of Chicago, and she was saying, why are we talking so much about just like covering up symptoms all the time? Why isn't everyone talking about like getting to the root of the problem? And I thought, well, yeah, that's the question I have too. I would love to figure that out. And she's like, well, have you ever considered Chinese medicine? And she actually had eczema, allergies, anaphylaxis, like all of it. And she, because her background is Asian, she tried Chinese medicine as a last resort, and she completely got better from all of it. And then she decided to like become a practitioner. So she had gotten her license and all that. So I worked with her for about 8 months, and that totally got me past the plateau that I was on. It really helped me. I finally slept through the night. Before that, every night I'd be up for hours just scratching. I was finally sleeping. The redness went away, this elephant skin that I had, and then it was expensive. And so because of things that were happening in my personal life too, I had to stop. But then my body still just continued the healing process from that point on. So it's just been a very slow, I would say, probably in comparison to many others in our community, I'm one of the long burners. A lot of people get through it like within 2 or 3 years, some even less, but some more. So it's hard to know. We don't really understand all of the implications. Right. Yeah.
Wow. So with your advocacy, how did that get you to the place where you were working with ITSAN?
Well, at first I just wanted to get through it and get on with my life because, I always hid my skin my whole life. It's like, I don't want anybody to know about this. Who would? Like about a weakness or a disease. So I figured I'm just going to get past this and go back to my life, being a mom. I was like a contract musician and artist at the time. But then it was so prolonged and so severe that there came a point where I was like, I can't walk away from this community, because we would see people get better and then they're just gone. You run a million miles away. You don't want anything to do with it anymore. It's a lot of people have PTSD who've gone through this. So, but when I was going, it's interesting because around 3.5 years in, I remember reading somewhere that the system won't change until they feel it financially. And so I had this thought, well, and I know a lot of people in our community think about this, is like, maybe there needs to be a lawsuit to get some of these companies to like change the labels or do something about this. And so I talked with an attorney who actually worked with the FDA, worked on product labeling, and told her about the situation. And she said, well, Kelly, number one, you're past the statute of limitation because it has to be within 1 year of stopping, which I'm like, well, I was too sick to do it then. And she's like, maybe a class action, but the problem is all of you guys are using multiple products. So you can't pin it on a product. It really is a class. But she said, I can get you a meeting with the FDA, but this is what you need to have, kind of in place. And she started down this laundry list. You need a big patient community. You need a group of doctors behind this. You need a strong nonprofit. If there isn't one, start one. And she just was listing all of these things. And by the end, we were at Starbucks and I got up and I thanked her for her time. And I was like, no way. This has taken 3 years of my life. Or she said, this could take 10 years, but you could make a change. It'll probably take about that much time to change it, but you can do it. And then I met with another friend of mine who was a clinical practitioner in the Bahamas. And I told her about the situation. She said, Kelly, you need to go on your gut, because medicine is constantly evolving, especially with the onset of pharmaceuticals. And she said when she was practicing, she was noticing a really high rate of breast cancer in young women. And she kept talking about it to her colleagues, and everybody was like, nah, nothing's going on. Well, finally, she just kept talking about it. And finally, someone did a small study and they showed, yes, the prevalence here is really high. And then another person did another study based on that information and found a biomarker. So she said, if you feel something in your gut, you need to pursue this. And then the crazy thing is that long laundry list I was given from this attorney, one thing after another just started falling in my lap.
Wow.
Yeah. And I realized that the president of ITSAN at the time lived 45 minutes from my parents in Michigan. And so when I went up there to visit them, I just reached out to her and I said, hey, I was imagining, this big organization. No, it's like a couple passionate volunteers are running this thing, trying to do something good in the world. So I met with her. We were going to meet for a half hour, and I walked away from that conversation with a position on the board. So that was in 2016, I believe. And so I just started sitting in on board calls. I know nothing about nonprofit management, but I just wanted to learn. And it was shortly after that I developed eczema herpeticum, which I really would love to talk to you about more, because I just had someone in our community reach out yesterday. And this is scary stuff that there's not a lot of knowledge around, especially because it's becoming more prevalent and it's new. But I started feeling kind of sick, and I had a couple spots I was 4.5 years into TSW at this point, a couple spots behind my leg. And I thought, well, this is just another weird TSW thing. My skin's doing a lot of strange stuff. And I thought I would just weather it. But I started to feel sick, like a little bit of flu feeling. And then when I'm looking at these spots, they're like black in the center, just on my leg. Well, then I start getting, my neck starts breaking out and oozing, which was really weird because that was it was in a much better place than it was, but it started opening up and oozing. And then I got sicker and sicker, and then more dots were coming on my arms. I set up an appointment for my derm. They took a biopsy, and she said, I want you to go straight to the ER. Don't even go home because you're really sick. So I went and got my husband, and we went to the hospital. They put me on antibiotics IV because they thought I had a bacterial infection, but I had eczema herpeticum, which was spreading like wildfire. And within like 3 or 4 days, I was covered from head to toe. I couldn't even move. I couldn't even put a sentence together. It was that painful. And I looked like someone from a medical journal. I mean, it was horrible, horrible. I've never gone through anything that terrible before. And it was really like after that experience when I went into a dark place because I had been fighting for 4 years to get past TSW. And then this happens. And then my marriage starts falling apart because my husband was like, it's a lot on everybody. And, but it really was after that time of like several months of just being in dark. I just wanted to crawl in a cave and die. It was like I didn't have any will left to fight. And then something amazing happened. I wrote about it in my book, but that's really what sparked the advocacy in me because I thought whether I live or die, I have to fight this with everything I have, even if it literally kills me. Because, at that time, now we're at tens of thousands of people that are going through this and they need support. They need just someone telling them you're going to get through, you're not crazy. There's help for you, and then working on a higher level with some of these federal institutions and agencies, and then having to go to Congress because they're not taking action. It's like, it's just been resistance on every side about this. But you can imagine with a drug that's been on the market for 70 years, hundreds of millions of people are using them for nearly every skin condition. Yeah, that's going to take a lot of effort to change. So, yeah.
So once you have TSW, is there an end to it?
There is an end to it. It doesn't look the same for everyone. Some people are completely clear of not just skin issues, but allergy issues, asthma issues, because their problem was steroid driven, which is pretty crazy. That's the hope everybody has, right? It's like, I want to go back to that. Some people like me now, I would say I'm past TSW, but I still have sensitive skin. So I was just up in Montana and my eyes blew up because of the wildfires up there, just because I'm sensitive. But do I have the red burning skin anymore? No, it's not oozing. It's not doing any of those symptoms. I don't have nerve issues, thermodysregulation, a lot of this weird stuff that we all went through. But it's a different timeline for everyone, which is part of the challenge of it. Because you can't say, 6 months from now, I'm going to be 100% better.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, we've seen some people 10, 12 years out and they really went through hell. They have perfectly clear, milky skin.
Wow.
Yeah. No more eczema even anymore. So yeah, it's pretty wild.
That's wild. That is so wild. So how do you educate people through ITSAN, and what are you doing to help them, number one, raising awareness, but also helping them to understand how to deal with the mental aspect and the physical aspect as well?
So we have an online Facebook support group that we have, I think, 27,000 people in there now, where this is a place where they can encourage each other. And it's been an amazing community where they're very, very supportive. So I'd say the mental health aspect, one of the biggest burdens is the fact that you feel like you're alone in the world, right? Because if no one believes you, but you are experiencing, your own body, what's happening, to find a group of other people who validate that and say, you're not crazy and we're here for you. And if you're having a bad day, people post about it. And then you have 30 people saying, it's okay, try this, you've got this, whatever. That's a big part of the mental health support. But our previous president is an RN, and she was all about getting every bit of literature we have on this together in one spot so that not only patients, but doctors can learn more about this issue. Because we've known about it since like 1969. It just was considered very, very, very rare. And it wasn't really like in textbooks or anything like that. So no one really was, familiar with what was going on. So that's what we try to do, is create a repository on the website for people to educate themselves, provide information for them to bring to their doctor, to, show pictures of this and how is this different than baseline eczema. We're building out a medical advisory board. We now have an advisory council of people from different levels of society, whether it be science, PR, medicine, like clinical practice, health policy. We're trying, like a patient, getting all of these people together to look at it in a broad way. How do we help solve this together? So, we have a social media presence, of course, that we try to put out information when there's new studies that have been published. And thank God they're coming more and more now as people are getting interested in it. But that's very helpful. We helped facilitate a small NIH pilot that just got published in the JID. And they did a big, huge press release on this because our researcher at NIH, Dr. Ian Miles, was saying, we've never even seen this before in science, what's happening in you guys. So there's a lab at the NIH. All they do is look at how steroids affect the human body. And we talked with him and he was saying, there are over 100 different pathways and there are so many other things that we don't even know. So how can we say steroids are perfectly safe to use for 5, 10, 20, 50 years with that knowledge? We don't know. So,
and there's still requirements by insurance, even if the doctor doesn't think that that's a good option for a patient, insurance companies are still demanding step therapy requirements. And so it makes it difficult.
Yes. Yeah. So many changes need to be made. It's crazy. Like all of the different angles that we need to approach this. So ITSAN for the past several years has been very, very high level, trying to do a lot of that behind the scenes stuff. We're working on an ICD-10 code with the CDC. It's gone through 2 reviews. It's coming up for its next one. We're trying to tweak it and put it in the right place. That's a whole process in itself. But then at least we'll be able to see prevalence and people can get coverage from insurance companies for these things. So that's going to be good. And then we're still trying to put pressure on the FDA for product label changes and a public health advisory. We're working with the NIH to try to really deal in longitudinal type studies. Let's look at the receptors for steroids and actually when do people become resistant? And then who's, more susceptible to this happening? Let's see if we can find some biomarkers and then we can, figure out that whole aspect too. So people aren't getting on the wrong medication.
Right. Yeah. So you also lead the Coalition of Skin Diseases. So what kind of work does the coalition do?
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, the beauty of being in a coalition is your voice is so much stronger and louder when you're doing it together. So we're 30 different national nonprofit skin patient advocacy groups that, anywhere from psoriasis, eczema, vitiligo, alopecia, some of the rare diseases, sarcoidosis, scleroderma, all of these people. The latest cited number is 84 million. That's back in 2013. So we think it's well over 100 million people in the US alone is dealing with a skin condition. Is mind-boggling. It's like a third of us have a skin condition. You would never know because we're all very good at hiding it.
That's
so our first course of action was to really raise awareness of the burden and the impact, because if policymakers don't understand how skin conditions can totally upend a person's life, why are they going to care about all of the other issues that we're asking them to take action on? So what we do every year is run a survey among our groups and ask them, what are the challenges that your patients are bumping up against? A lot of it has to do with insurance, unsurprisingly. And then, of course, there's always a call for more research. So we are big on that, research funding and more priority into skin disease in general at NIAMS and other places at the NIH. So we get together, we go to the Hill every year. We bring people from all of our different groups and talk to our members just about the needs that we have. And then a lot of the work that the coalition does is member development, where we're trying to pour into these groups that are pouring out into the patient community, because it's a lonely road when you're in nonprofit and you're wearing 10 hats and there's never enough time in the day. And it feels kind of like being a parent where you can't just shut off the work,
Mhm.
or close the laptop. It's nonstop. And I have people reaching out to me all the time, and you feel such an urgency to help because, man, it's your personal experience. How do you just ignore that?
Right.
So it's a burden, even though it's very meaningful or rewarding work, it's hard work. So that's what we try to do as a coalition, is facilitate different things like professional development or just times to be together and network and all of that. So we
Wow.
really want to be the voice for all derm patients, whether that's to the FDA or, research institutions or CME or,
Mhm.
members of Congress. So,
Yeah. So how can anyone get involved? So if, we've got a lot of listeners that are working in the derm medical offices, how can they get involved and what can they do?
with ITSAN or with the CSD
Yeah,
or
with
both?
both, really. Are there opportunities for both?
Yeah, we see, like, as far as looking at and putting my CSD hat on, when we go and advocate as patients linked arm with practitioners, that is like the most powerful duo because you're getting the why. We've talked about the healthcare system, and sometimes like the patients are the ones who are suffering at the end of all the money making and all of this, the system that's set up
Mhm.
currently as it is. So when you have the person who's the end user coming forward and saying, this is what I'm experiencing, and you have that backed up by a medical professional and them giving their perspective also about all the administration burdens and everything else that's going on, that is a powerful message. So we're trying to build our Hill Day to pull in some of our affiliate groups, which, the AAD, the SID, we're trying to get where SDPA is on their way in, but DNA, SOX, lots of these groups are connected with us. And so we're trying to represent all of derm and the work that we're doing. We're actually working on a congressional skin caucus at the moment also, because we figure if we can get some members who are really championing some of our issues, that's going to move things forward a lot faster.
Yeah.
So yeah, if they're interested and want to reach out, we're always looking to build out our medical advisory board too on the issues that we're working on at the time. As far as ITSAN, we need all the allies that we can get. And we're trying to do a lot in education, actually talking about some ways to make that happen now, because a lot of it is just understanding what could happen and knowing how to recognize it, how to diagnose, how to treat, and then how to prevent in the future. And a lot of it happens by word of mouth, and it's happening slowly, but again, to address some of what's happening on the internet and this disconnect between doctors and patients,
Mhm.
my heart is to rebuild that relationship again so that patients are trusting doctors and doctors are listening to patients, and we're working on this together. It's
Yeah.
so critical.
Yeah, absolutely. You said something really interesting, how patients aren't necessarily trying to, not go to the doctor's office. Have you heard of that app? It's called Nextdoor.
Yes.
And so you can, if you have a question about something, maybe it's within the community, who's the best at cutting grass, or, who's good at, window cleaning or replacement, things like that. You're looking for answers, right? You want to get those answers really quick because you know that there's a community that can provide those answers. I feel like that's kind of the same thing with, going online to find questions or find the answers to
Yeah.
some of the questions that you have. So it's not necessarily that they don't want to ask the doctor. It's because it's very quick, easy access to go and ask a peer what their opinion is, even if it's on that, hey, is this doctor's office a good one? Have you guys, what are the
Yes.
reviews that you've heard? I think people are always looking for those reviews first before they go and get those questions answered. So, like you said, there's got to be a way to kind of tighten that group a little bit so that you can say, hey, these are the best resources that we can find. And this is where you're going to get good information and quality, legitimate information that can really help you and benefit you as a
Yes.
patient.
That's one of the biggest questions we get as an organization, people reaching out to us and saying, can you help me find a doctor in my area? And so we have a list, an internal list of recommended doctors, and they're not necessarily vetted by us, but these are just doctors who are willing to help patients go through this process. I can't tell you how many times I personally have experienced this, where I'll go into a doctor and tell them what's going on, and I don't want to use steroids. I can't use steroids. It's not an option for me. And they literally write me a script for steroids. as I'm leaving. She's like, ah.
Right.
And so patients just need to be, cared for by someone who's actually listening and trying to work with them. It should be shared decision-making. I know there's a lot of like buzz around that word right now, but I understand the limitations, the fact that we don't have a lot of time together. That's just part of the challenges that we have to face. So we're also trying to educate patients. How can you maximize that time with your doctor? What can you get done ahead of time so you don't waste it talking about the stuff that doesn't matter? Like really get to the heart of it and see how you can work together. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining me. What is the website where people can find ITSAN and CSD?
Yeah. So ITSAN is just ITSAN.org, ITSAN.org. Very simple. You can find lots of information about TSW. You can see a lot of pictures on there, case studies, things. And then the CSD is the skincoalition.org. And then if they're interested in my book, it's To Eczema with Love. Yeah.
I'll have to check that out. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I know you had Brianna Bonos on here before, but I would say has now finished her second documentary on TSW. So that's another resource that people could watch if they're interested in what patients are experiencing and in the current knowledge on this condition. So it's either preventable, and you can find it on YouTube, or still preventable on YouTube. So,
yes. I know. I need to have her back on and talk about her second documentary. That's amazing.
Yeah, good. Well, thank you so much, Janelle. It's just been really wonderful to be here with you. And thanks for highlighting the issue, because we have to talk about it. We've got to figure it out together.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks for spending a few minutes with me and listening to That's Derm Good. You can expect new episodes of That's Derm Good every week. The podcast is available on your favorite app, including where you're listening right now. Subscribe to the podcast so you never miss a new episode. Bye.